This is Stacy McKibben with the Master Communicator podcast, where CEOs, senior leaders, and C-suite executives share their advice. It's 6 questions in 9 minutes because the best leaders know how to share their ideas concisely and quickly. Let's jump right in. Question number 1. In a few sentences, please tell us who you are and what you do.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. I love that bubbly intro. My name is Mathew Cahill. I lead a management consulting firm that's founded on the belief that if you have a brain, you have bias. The name of my company is called the Percipio Company, and we help organizations and leaders understand how our brain is using bias to protect us, both literally to keep us safe from harm and also to protect us from the onslaught of information that our brain is dealing with at any one time. But it also can lead to unique circumstances, often outside of our awareness, that cause deeper problems within an organization.
Amen to that. I'm so excited somebody's out there, really doing a lot of that brain work, because I think, unfortunately, it influences a lot of our behavior, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's over 200 different named cognitive biases. This is one of the fastest growing areas of research on the planet. And even though all of these different cognitive biases, they're universal, right? We all have them. They're not neutral, right? So cognitive biases all have different blind spots that we all land in, right? Where we're making mental mistakes or stereotyping people or understanding, how these cognitive biases work can give us tools to mitigate the negative effects of them.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to hear what you have to say today about some of these ideas about leading people through change and things like that, because I'm sure all those people have brains, as you said,
and therefore they have bias.
So that leads me greatly to question number 2, which is, what's the best thing about leading people through change from your perspective?
Oh, wow. I think setting the stage to allow for the light bulb moments to come on, right? Like that is such an art, not a science. Really allowing people to go through a process of self-discovery, right? I take a self-reflective approach when I work with people in organizations to allow them to understand, I use the construct of bias, but how they can really create an environment in their organizations of belonging, where people feel seen, valued, heard, proud of what they do, right? The insights that that leaders gain from doing this type of work create the systemic changes within their organization.
You remind me of that, psychological safety that we're hearing so much about these days, where it's really, how do you create that environment for people to perform and feel whole at the same time?
Yeah. If you don't have, that's a prereq, right? That's like table stakes. You need to have psychological safety, because whatever type of work you're doing, at some level, people just abhor change, right? They just don't want to do it. And yet it's one of the few things in life that you're absolutely guaranteed that you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So then, that's perfect, segue to question 3, which is, what piece of advice then would you give to other leaders about implementing change?
Gosh, I try not to give advice because the wise don't need it and the ignorant won't heed it. But I think to try to avoid change, right? That's a common pattern that's rooted in, a normalcy bias, or a bias that we do. Our brains seek out comfort, right? And so it often leads us to follow the path of least resistance, when the path of least resistance may not be the right path that we need to be on and lead our organization down. And so to try to avoid change is futile, right? It's futile. It's not a question of if you need to adapt or change. It's really a question of when and how well you embrace it.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because over this time period, especially with the pandemic and things like that, where we're experiencing a lot of remote working, I've been hearing from a lot of leaders that they're just really struggling with, creating the relationships and the bonds with their team still, holding them accountable, making sure that they're getting done what they need to get done. And I think a lot of it has to do with they just aren't, getting the benefit of the walk by leadership or, overhearing them at the water cooler or things like that. I'm curious, are you seeing some of this, and how are you coaching people to address that?
This this type of coaching and consulting has been one of the fastest growing areas of my business. So when the pandemic hit last year in March, April, companies were freaking out. And then you heard a lot of this, murmurings over the last 11 months about how people are feeling isolated and disconnected and, the challenges of a remote workforce. What I started then and have doubled down on and have escalated and spread is a premise that virtual meetings, remote work, can be more effective than in-person meetings if you change the way you prepare and structure those meetings. And it sounds like a subtle change. It is, but it's deeply profound. This can be incredibly engaging, right? But you have to be way more intentional about doing emotional check-ins with people, about encouraging people to get their cameras on, right? To prepare themselves, even, not to the degree that they did when you had to dress yourself up and get in your car and commute to work, but, level up, raise the game, people, get psychologically ready to come to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Figure out how you're going to most effectively engage with people, and don't just talk at them for a half an hour, 45 minutes. That's ludicrous.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Don't make me lose my pandemic pants, Matt. I think we've all
Well,
got really comfortable in that way.
I go the other route, is just embrace that as the new norm. You know what I mean? Like have people stand up and give a virtual tour of your space. Like, when you think about how invasive this is,
I
right? This
know.
is often
Mm-hmm.
something that's overlooked. You would normally in a pre-COVID world, you might meet a colleague, one maybe, that you would bond with and maybe invite over to your house at some point in time. Otherwise, you were meeting them at a restaurant or somewhere for cocktails and stuff. And if somebody did get to that point over time where you invited them to your house, you would clean up everything and make sure everything. I mean, now all of a sudden people were just in each other's houses. Like, get up out of my grill. It's a very invasive thing that is overlooked. And I think when you bring it into the fold, you can get more comfortable and confident, and it just creates a connection.
What daily practice is most important to you as a leader?
What we're just describing, connection, right? Like getting checked in with people emotionally. Where are you at? How are you doing? How are your kids? How are you dealing with living by yourself? What's the best thing in your life? Not, what's new, because what's new is so transient, it's superficial. But when you ask people what's best in your life, that gets them thinking a little deeper. And so I try to make sure my daily habits, every interaction has, some type of a measure of accountability. Like, I want to know who that person is on a deeper level. And that's what I hold myself accountable to do in all of my interactions and conversations.
That's awesome. All right, magic question number 6 for you. What other successful business leaders like yourself should be on our show? Who else should we be paying attention to?
Well, two people pop to mind, and they're both part of an executive committee for a weekly series called Inclusive Leadership in a Virtual World. And the first is Belle Walker. She is amazing at taking organizations from friction to function. And the other guy is Leo Manzioni. He's an incredibly magnificent consultant who helps people go through deepening and optimizing their processes and making them more efficient and better run organizations. So those two people absolutely jump to mind. My intellectual cycle that I lean on consistently, because I believe what we feed our brains ultimately transcends into our behaviors. There's a podcast called Hidden Brain, which is a go-to. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Fantastic. Well, Belle was actually on the show, so I'm super excited that you recommended her. That's awesome. And some of the guests might remember her being on there. So, well, Matt, it's been absolutely a delight having you on the show. And as always, I just love hearing your insights and your ideas. I'm curious if folks wanted to reach out and introduce themselves or learn more about you, how might they find you?
You can get directly connected with me by going to percipiocompany.com. It's PERCIPIO company.com.
Fantastic. Well, everybody knows I'll put it in the link below here so they can click and find you right away. But again, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope you come back and do a future session with us as well.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, this is Stacy McKibben with the Master Communicator podcast. For more ideas and insights, please do go check it out at www.concilioteam.com. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.